Hello. Lately I've been thinking about how often we confuse our thoughts with who we are. And this is kind of tying in to my last episode, which was about meditation and what it is and what it's not. But anyway, we say things like, I'm anxious, I'm bad at this, I'm just an angry person, as if the thoughts that appear in our minds are direct statements of truth, as if they're actually us. But what if they're not? What if the brain works a lot more like artificial intelligence than we realize? So if I break it down like how AI works in simple terms, AI doesn't know anything. It doesn't have beliefs. It doesn't have intentions. It doesn't have a self. But what it does have is training. AI is trained on massive amounts of past data. It learns patterns, associations, probabilities. And when you give it a prompt, it doesn't decide what's true. It generates what's likely based on what it has seen before. So it predicts the next word and then the next and then the next. And sometimes what it generates is brilliant. Sometimes it's nonsense. Sometimes it's biased. Sometimes it's flat out wrong. I don't know how many of you guys have used ChatGPT looking for answers and it gives you something that's just not true at all. And yet it sounds confident, so you want to believe everything that it says, right? And that's the part that gets us probably. But I want to bring that back to our brains and how it works. Like, there's an uncomfortable similarity there. Our brains work in a surprisingly similar way, and your mind is constantly generating thoughts. Not because they're true, but because they're familiar. It predicts what you might say, what could go wrong a lot of the times, how you felt before in similar situations, what you were taught about yourself, love, danger, worth. So your brain is not asking, is this helpful? It's asking, what comes next based on past input? And it just keeps generating. So your thoughts feel so convincing because just like AI, the brain doesn't label its output. It doesn't say, hey, this is just a pattern I learned when you were 7 years old. It just presents the thought. It says, I'm failing. It says, they're judging me. It says, this won't work. It says, you always mess this up. And because the thought appears inside your head, you assume it must be you. But that's a misunderstanding of the system. Thoughts are outputs. They're not identity. There's a quiet moment that changes everything. It's the moment you realize, oh, my mind is talking, not me, my mind. That moment doesn't stop the thoughts. You'll forget it. This is a lesson that you have to learn again and again and again and again and recognize it. But you will re-identify with your thoughts. Like it's a constant push and pull where you get lost in your thoughts for a while and then you pull out and you remember and you wake up and you realize that you were identifying with them again and that you are not your thoughts. You get pulled back into the story and then you pull back out and realize that you're the one with the controller. You're not the one in the game. You are the one outside of the game holding the controller. And all of this is very normal. Even if you never wake up, it's very normal. But once you've seen that your thoughts are generated, trained, if you will, predictive, you can't unsee it completely. You begin to notice patterns. You begin to recognize, this thought sounds familiar. This is one my brain likes to generate when I'm tired. This one shows up when I feel unsafe. This one is clearly trained on the past. So some people turn off the executive function on purpose, like when they're if they're a good speaker and they just kind of like are able to just turn off their executive function brain and just let their AI talk. Sometimes it feels almost like somebody's speaking through you, because you're like, oh wow, that was brilliant. I had no idea that was living in my head. Sometimes the most surprising insight comes when you stop trying to control the mind. When you stop editing, you stop judging, you stop steering, and you let the mind speak freely. This could be through journaling, voice notes, creative play. You might find yourself saying things you didn't consciously plan. It can feel a little unsettling at first, but it can also be revealing, because you start to hear old scripts, inherited beliefs, emotional residue, fears that aren't actually present-day problems. Or on the flip side, it could reveal really good ideas, or things that you let your mind chew on in the background, and suddenly you have the answer for something that you didn't realize could come so easily. But anyway, all of this to say, you're not discovering truth from letting your AI talk on its own. You're discovering training data. But this isn't hopeless. This is, I like to think of it as empowering. The good news is AI can be retrained, and so can your brain. Not overnight, and not by force, and not by arguing with every thought, but by changing the inputs. What you expose yourself to, how you speak to yourself, what stories you rehearse, what you practice returning to. Every time you notice a thought and you don't follow it, you're weakening the old pathway. Every time you choose a different response, you feed new data into the system. And the brain learns from repetition, not insight. Insight can open the door, but practice is what's going to rewire the room, if that makes sense. And just a reminder, you are not the generator, you are the observer. This is the most important part. You are not the machine that produces thoughts. You are the awareness that notices them. Thoughts can be helpful. They can be creative. They can be protective. But they can also be outdated or dramatic, and sometimes flat out untrue. And your job isn't to silence the mind, but it is always good to stop confusing your output, confusing the output of your brain with authority. And yes, you will forget, time and time again. You will wake up tomorrow and believe a thought again. You'll feel like it's you, like it's real, like it's urgent. And that doesn't mean you failed. It means that the system is working as designed. So the practice is simply remembering again. Oh, this is just my brain generating. And in that moment, even for a second, you're free. So I feel like I talk a lot in the abstract, which is very helpful for somebody like me. But there are, some people that, if you follow Myers-Briggs, are more sensing types. And I'm reminded of this because my dad in the last video commented that I was talking in Greek, because I was just saying a bunch of things that, are hard to understand. So I want to tell a story that hopefully can bring this concept and idea into the real world, and hopefully it feels a little less Greek and more like English. Okay, so story time, and sorry if you can hear the leaf blower in the background. So there's a moment that I remember very clearly. I was standing in the kitchen, holding my daughter, bouncing her gently while I was getting my coffee brewed. And it was a weekend day, and my husband was logged into work, headphones on, pacing as he's thinking. The house felt both loud and quiet at the same time. And suddenly, I heard my mind start talking. You're doing everything. He doesn't see how much you're carrying. You're going to burn out. This isn't fair. And the thoughts came fast, and they were confident, and they were urgent. And for a moment, I believed them. My body tightened, my jaw clenched, my chest felt heavy. I started building a case in my head, replaying moments, stacking evidence, rehearsing a version of myself that was angry and right. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that kind of experience. Then something else happened. A quieter voice showed up, not another thought, but a noticing. Oh, I said to myself, this is my brain generating again. And that stopped me. Not because the thoughts disappeared, because they didn't. They kept coming. For example, see, you're even invalidating yourself now. You shouldn't have to talk to yourself out of resentment. Right? Our brains are fun that way. They're very protective of us, I swear. But now I could hear them differently. They sounded familiar, like lines I'd heard before. So, like scripts that had been rehearsed long before this kitchen, this baby, and this marriage. I realized my brain wasn't reporting facts. It was predicting. It was doing what it had learned to do in moments of stress. It's scanning for imbalance, assuming there's a threat, and it's preparing for self-protection. And it's not because my husband's the enemy. He's actually quite lovely, and I'm lucky to be married to him. And it's not because I was actually alone, and it's not because my nervous system had been trained in a world where closeness often came with a cost. I didn't need to argue with the thoughts. I just needed to stop treating them like they had authority over me. So instead of snapping or swallowing it or spiraling, I paused. And I looked down on my daughter. I listened to the coffee finish brewing. I took a breath. And I said, not out loud, but clearly in my mind, thank you. I see what you're doing. Not, you're wrong. Not, shut up. Just, I see you. And this, I was talking to my thoughts, by the way, if that wasn't clear. The thoughts kept generating for a bit. That's what they do. But eventually they lost their grip. And later that day, when things were calm, I spoke to my husband, not from resentment, but from clarity, and not as a victim, but as a partner. And the most interesting part is the moment I stopped identifying with the thoughts, they actually changed. The generator updated. New thoughts appeared. This is a season. You're allowed to ask for support. You're not trapped. You're choosing. Not because I forced them, but because I had fed the system new data. And I've been working on this for the past 11 months since I gave birth. So that's kind of what it looks like when you realize your brain is more like an AI than a narrator of truth. It generates based on history, and it predicts based on survival. And it speaks with confidence, even when it's outdated. You don't win by silencing it. You win by remembering you're not the voice, you're the one listening. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, yeah, your thoughts are not you. They are predictions based on the past, and that's just what it is. You're allowed to thank your brain for trying to help without letting it ruin your life. And you don't need to delete the system. You just need to remember who's watching it. You are the observer, not the generator. All right, that's all I got today. Dad, you can let me know if I was talking in Greek or or if I make any sense. All right. Bye.